The morning light on Xylos Prime was always wrong. That's what I thought, standing there on the observation deck of the Imperial Palace, watching that sickly green sun crawl over the crystalline spires of the capital city. Wrong color, wrong warmth, wrong everything. But after 15 years, I'd gotten used to wrong. My name is Marcus Webb, former Marine, former prisoner of war, former everything that mattered. Now I was just a guard. The palace guards wore these ridiculous white uniforms with gold trim, ceremonial nonsense that would get you killed in a real firefight. But the Zalosians loved their pageantry. Everything was a performance with them. Even their empire, which spanned 17 star systems and had crushed 3 other civilizations, was run like an elaborate stage production. I adjusted the collar of my uniform and tried not to think about how much I hated it. Soldier Webb. The voice came from behind me, soft and melodic, with that particular lilt that Zalosian royalty used when they wanted to remind you they were better than you. I turned and bowed. Protocol, always protocol. Your Highness. Princess Aelira stood in the doorway, and for a moment the wrongness of the morning light didn't matter. She was tall for her species, nearly my height, with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes that shifted between gold and amber depending on the light. Her black hair was pulled back in the elaborate braids of her station, threaded with thin filaments of gold that caught the light like captured stars. She was wearing the ceremonial robes of the Dawn Court, all flowing silks and embroidered constellations, and she looked absolutely miserable. "You're brooding again," she said. "I don't brood, Your Highness, I contemplate." "Contemplate, brood, you do the same thing with your face." She stepped closer and I caught the familiar scent of her perfume, something floral and alien that I'd never quite been able to identify. "What is it this time? The color of the sky, the quality of the food. The fact that you're the only human within 500 light years. The fact that you're about to go through with this ceremony, when every instinct tells me it's a bad idea." Her smile faded. "We've discussed this, Marcus." "We've discussed it, we haven't resolved it, there's a difference." She moved past me to the observation window, her robes whispering against the polished stone floor. The capital city stretched out below us, a maze of crystalline towers and floating platforms, all connected by bridges of pure light. It was beautiful in a way that made your chest hurt. It was also a monument to an empire that had conquered more worlds than I could count. "The delegation from the outer reach arrives today," she said quietly. "The ceremony must proceed as planned." "The ceremony," I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. "The ceremony where you promise to marry some prince you've never met from a system you've never visited, all to shore up trade routes that benefit the merchant class." "It's diplomacy, Marcus. It's how empires are maintained." "It's a transaction. You're being traded like cargo." She turned to face me, and I saw the flash of anger in her eyes, that particular fire that had always reminded me why I'd stayed, even when every instinct told me to run. "You think I don't know that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You think I'm not aware of what's happening. I am a princess of the Imperial House. I've known my purpose since the day I was born. And if marrying some distant prince is what's required to keep the peace, then I'll do it." "Keep the peace," I said. "That's what they're calling it now." "What would you call it?" I wanted to say something honest. I wanted to tell her that her father was a tyrant who'd sold her for political gain, that the empire was rotten to its core, that she deserved better than this life of silk and chains. Instead, I said, "I don't know, Your Highness, I'm just a guard." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before, something almost like pity. "No," she said softly, "you're not just a guard, you never were." The morning ceremony was a spectacle, as expected. The great hall of the Imperial Palace could hold 10,000 people, and every seat was filled. Delegates from 100 worlds, all dressed in their finest, all watching with the hungry eyes of vultures. The Xylosian elite sat in their raised boxes, their jeweled faces carefully neutral, while the lower castes crowded the floor below. I stood in my assigned position, 3 meters behind the princess's throne, and watched the show. The representatives from the outer reach arrived in a procession that took nearly an hour to wind through the hall. There were 16 of them, all dressed in deep blue robes with silver trim. The prince, a lean, sharp-featured man with skin the color of slate, walked at the front, his expression unreadable. His eyes found Princess Aelira immediately, and I saw the flicker of something in them. Appreciation, hunger, both probably. He was getting what every ambitious noble wanted: access to the imperial bloodline. The ceremony itself was a blur of ritual and rhetoric, promises of alliance, promises of prosperity, promises that meant nothing from people who meant less than nothing. I watched Aelira move through the motions with practiced grace. Her smile never faltered, her voice never wavered. She was the perfect princess performing her role on the imperial stage. And I hated every second of it. The banquet that followed was worse. Long tables stretched across the secondary hall, laden with delicacies from a dozen worlds. The air was thick with the smell of exotic spices and the sound of polite conversation. Everyone was pretending to be pleased, pretending that this marriage was something other than a political transaction. I was standing against the wall, trying to be invisible, when the prince approached me. "You're the human," he said, "not a question." "Yes, Your Highness." "I've heard about you." His eyes swept over me with barely concealed disdain. "The princess's pet, the one who survived the war." "I'm her guard, Your Highness, nothing more." "Her guard," he laughed, a sharp sound that drew attention from nearby tables. "I know what you are, I know why you're really here. But I want you to understand something, human." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the wine on his breath and see the cold calculation in his eyes. "The princess belongs to me now. Our contract is signed. Our vows are exchanged. She is my property, my possession, my trophy. And I won't have my property guarded by some pathetic human who thinks he's more than he is." The old rage rose up in me, hot and familiar. It took everything I had to keep my face neutral, to keep my hands at my sides instead of around his throat. "I understand, Your Highness." "Good," he smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be entirely humanoid. "Because if I ever see you near her again, if you so much as look at her the wrong way, I'll have you spaced. Slowly. Do you understand?" "I understand." He studied me for a moment, searching for defiance. When he found none, his smile widened. "Excellent. You're not as stupid as you look." He turned and walked away, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The rage was still there, burning in my chest, but I pushed it down. I'd gotten good at that over the years, good at hiding what I really felt, good at pretending I was nothing more than a soldier following orders. But as I watched the prince return to his table and place his hand on the princess's arm, a proprietary gesture that made my blood boil, I felt something shift inside me. I'd sworn an oath to protect her, I'd meant it. And no prince from the outer reach was going to take that away from me. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days later. I was on duty at the princess's private quarters, standing watch in the antechamber while she met with her ladies-in-waiting. The room was quiet, just the soft murmur of voices and the distant hum of the palace's life support systems. Then the lights flickered. I looked up, frowning. The palace's power grid was supposed to be flawless, backed up by no less than 7 redundant systems. Flickering lights weren't supposed to happen. The voices in the inner chamber stopped. A moment later, the door slid open, and Aelira appeared. "What was that?" she asked. "I don't know, Your Highness. I'll check." I was reaching for my communicator when the alarm started. The sound was deafening, a piercing wail that echoed through every corridor of the palace. Red warning lights began to flash, painting the walls in blood. "Intruder alert," I said, reading the warning on my wristcom. "Multiple breaches in the outer perimeter." "Intruders." Elira's face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Who?" "I don't know, but I need to get you to the secure bunker, now." She didn't argue. She grabbed a ceremonial dagger from the display case in her antechamber, a foolish gesture against whatever was coming, but I wasn't going to stop her, and followed me out the door. The corridors of the palace were chaos. Servants and courtiers ran in every direction, their robes streaming behind them. Some of them had weapons, I noticed. Interesting. The Imperial Guard wasn't supposed to arm the courtiers. "Where's the watch?" I demanded, grabbing one of the fleeing servants. "Where's the garrison?" "Dead," the servant gasped. "They're all dead. They came out of nowhere." The servant's head exploded. I dove on top of Elira, shielding her with my body, as plasma fire raked the corridor. The servant's body crumpled to the floor, and I felt the heat of the bolts passing inches above my back. "Move," I shouted, dragging Elira into a side passage. "This way." We ran through the palace, ducking through service corridors and maintenance shafts, trying to stay ahead of the attackers. I could hear them behind us, the sound of weapons fire, the screams of the dying, the heavy thud of armored feet on stone. "Who are they?" Elira gasped as we ran. "Who's attacking?" "I don't know, but they're good, too good. They took out the entire garrison in minutes." We burst out onto an observation deck, and I finally got a look at what was happening. The capital city was burning. Crystalline towers that had stood for centuries were crumbling, their shining surfaces cracked and charred. Ships filled the sky, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all sleek and black and bristling with weaponry. And in the center of it all, hovering above the imperial palace like a black sun, was a ship I recognized. The Vengeance. I'd seen that ship before, I'd been on it before, and I knew exactly who was in command. "Kaelin," I breathed. Elira looked at me, her eyes wide. "What?" "Kaelin. The warlord from the Outer Reach. The one your father defeated 20 years ago. He's come back." "But how? He was supposed to be dead. The fleet destroyed his base." "He survived, and he spent 20 years planning his revenge." I grabbed her arm. "We need to get to the shuttle bay. There's a ship there that can get us off-world." The shuttle bay was chaos when we reached it. Ships were exploding, fighters were screaming through the atmosphere, and everywhere was the sound of plasma fire and screaming. I pushed Elira toward the nearest shuttle, a small luxury craft that would be fast enough to outrun the fighters. "Get in," I ordered. "Lock the doors behind me." "What are you doing?" She grabbed my arm. "Marcus, you need to come with me." "I'll hold them off. Give you time to get clear." "No, I won't leave you." "You have to." I pulled out my sidearm, a small plasma pistol that wasn't going to do much against the kind of firepower the attackers were bringing. "Elira, you're the only heir. If you die, the Empire falls. You have to survive." "I don't care about the Empire." "Then care about me. If you stay, we both die. If you go, at least one of us survives." She looked at me, and for a moment I thought she was going to argue. Then she nodded, her expression hardening into the mask I'd seen her wear so many times before. "I'll come back for you," she said. "I promise. Just go." She ducked into the shuttle, and I slammed the door shut. A moment later, the engines engaged, and the little craft rocketed out of the bay, dodging through the chaos of the battle. I turned to face the attackers. There were dozens of them, their armor black and faceless, their weapons trained on me. I raised my pistol, knowing it was futile, and prepared to die. Then the leader stepped forward. He was tall, even for a Zelosian, with gray skin that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes were black and bottomless, and when he smiled, I saw rows of needle-sharp teeth. Marcus Webb, he said, his voice a dry whisper. I was hoping you'd survive. You're going to be very useful. Kalen, you're supposed to be dead. Obviously, reports of my death were exaggerated. He gestured, and two of his soldiers grabbed my arms, pinning them behind my back. I have a proposition for you, human, a chance to make things right. I'm not interested in anything you have to offer. Not even if it involves your precious princess. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What are you talking about? Kalen smiled again, and I saw his hand move to his belt. He pressed a switch, and a holographic projection appeared in the air between us. It showed the shuttle I just sent Elira away on. It was surrounded by black ships, her escape route cut off. The shuttle's engines were sputtering, trying to power up again, but the enemy fighters had her pinned. She's alive, Kalen said, reading my expression. For now, but that's going to change very soon, unless... Unless what? Unless you agree to help me. He stepped closer, and I felt the weight of his gaze on me. There are things I need to know, secrets that the Imperial family has kept hidden for centuries, and you, Marcus Webb, are the key to unlocking them. I don't know any secrets. Of course you do, you just don't realize it yet. He gestured again, and one of his soldiers pressed a needle into my neck. The world started to blur at the edges, my vision swimming with strange colors. But you'll tell me, eventually, they all do. The last thing I saw before the darkness claimed me was Elira's shuttle being captured. And then I was gone. That wasn't unusual. I'd been in plenty of cages over the years. What was unusual was that this cage wasn't on a ship. It was in a large, warehouse-like space, filled with row after row of similar cages, each one containing a person of some species or other. I sat up slowly, my head pounding from whatever the soldiers had injected me with. The cage was small, barely enough room for me to stretch out, and made of a material I didn't recognize. Some sort of transparent alloy, strong enough to hold me and reinforced with energy bars that crackled when I touched them. Hey, I said, my voice rough, is anyone there? A figure stirred in the next cage, a small bird-like creature with blue feathers and too many eyes. You're awake, it chirped. Good. We were starting to think you might not. Where are we? Auction house, the Nebula Market specifically, big place, lots of buyers. The bird creature clicked its beak. They're going to sell us all to the highest bidder. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to focus. The auction house. I'd heard of it, a slave market that operated outside of any recognized jurisdiction. It was supposed to be a myth, a rumor spread to scare people. Apparently, it was real. The princess, I said. The Zalosian princess, is she here? The bird creature cocked its head. The copper-skinned one? Yes, she's been here for a few days now. She's causing quite a stir. Royalty doesn't show up on the market very often. They're planning to make her the main attraction. I felt the rage building again, hot and sharp. They'd taken her. They'd sold her. And I'd been unconscious through all of it. Where is she? 2 rows down on the left, but you can't see her from here. The cages are designed to be isolated. The bird creature looked at me with all 4 of its eyes. You know her. I was her guard. Oh, the bird creature's feathers ruffled slightly. That's awkward. Are you just going to sit there and chirp at me, or are you going to help me escape? It let out a noise that might have been laughter. Escape? From the Nebula Market? Impossible. No one's ever escaped from here. Then I'll be the first. I started examining my cage, looking for weaknesses. The transparent alloy was strong, but I'd seen its type before. It could be broken with enough focused force, particularly if I could find something to use as a lever. The bird creature watched me with obvious amusement. You're going to try. You're actually going to try. I'm going to try, and you're going to help me. Me how? Be a diversion. When I start breaking out, start making as much noise as you can. Draw their attention. You're insane. Probably. I'd found what I was looking for, a seam in the alloy where the energy bars met. It was a weak point, just barely visible if you knew where to look. But I've survived worse. The bird creature was silent for a moment. Then it let out a long, weary sigh. Fine, I'll help you. But if this works, I'm never going anywhere near a human again. We waited for night cycle, or what passed for night in the auction house. The lights dimmed, and the guards on duty settled into their routine, checking the cages every 20 minutes like clockwork. 20 minutes, that was my window. Now, I whispered. The bird creature started to scream. It was a piercing, horrible sound, like metal scraping against metal, and it echoed through the warehouse with painful intensity. The guards reacted immediately, running toward the source of the noise. I got to work. Using the edge of my uniform's insignia, a sharp piece of metal I'd carefully removed, I started working on the seam in the alloy. It was slow going, painstaking work, but I could feel the material starting to give under the pressure. 14 minutes. The guards were still distracted by the bird creature's screaming. 10 minutes, the seam was widening. 6 minutes, I could see the energy bars starting to flicker. 3 minutes, I heard footsteps approaching. I threw my weight against the weak point, and the cage exploded outward. The energy bars shattered, and I was free. The guard who'd been approaching was too surprised to react. I grabbed his weapon, a sleek plasma rifle, and smashed the butt into his face. He went down without a sound. The other guards were still gathered around the bird creature's cage, arguing among themselves. I took them out quickly and quietly, using the plasma rifle's stun setting to drop them one by one. Not bad, I said to the bird creature as I released it. Not bad at all. It blinked all 4 of its eyes at me. You actually did it. You actually escaped. We're not out yet. We need to find the princess and get to a ship. She's 2 rows down on the left. I told you that. Then let's go. Finding the princess was easier than I'd expected. Her cage was larger than the others, more secure too, but I'd anticipated that. I had the guards' access codes, and they let me bypass the security systems. Elira was unconscious when I reached her, slumped in the corner of her cage. Her face was bruised, and there was a bandage on her arm where someone had taken a blood sample. I felt a surge of protective rage, so strong it almost knocked me off my feet. Your Highness, I said, my voice urgent. Elira, wake up. She stirred slowly, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw me, something changed in her expression, a mix of surprise and relief, and something deeper that I couldn't quite identify. Marcus, she breathed, I thought you were dead. Not yet, not until I get you home. I accessed the cage's controls and opened the door. She stumbled out, and I caught her before she could fall. How long was I out? I asked. 3 days. They put you under while they transported us. The drugs are slow to clear in humans. I need to get you out of here. She looked at me, and I saw the weight of everything that had happened reflected in her eyes. My father is dead, she said quietly. The entire imperial family is dead. The empire has fallen. Then we'll build a new one. Come on. The escape from the Nebula Market was brutal. We fought our way through the auction house, using the captured weapons to cut a path toward the docks. The bird creature, whose name turned out to be Crix, had found a handful of other prisoners willing to fight, and they joined our growing force. But the market's security was relentless. They sent wave after wave of soldiers at us, and each wave took something. One of our allies, a piece of our ammunition, another precious second of time. We were pinned down in a maintenance corridor, only meters from the docking bay, when I knew we were running out of options. There's too many of them, Crix chirped, his feathers bloodied. We can't get through. Watch me. I pulled out a grenade, one I'd taken from a fallen guard, and primed it. Then I threw it down the corridor, toward the incoming soldiers. The explosion was deafening. When the smoke cleared, the corridor was littered with bodies. "Go," I shouted, "now." We ran through the chaos, dodging plasma fire and shattered debris until we reached the docking bay. There was a ship there, a small cargo freighter, old but serviceable. I didn't know who it belonged to, and I didn't care. "Everyone on board," I ordered. "Elira, you're with me." She followed me to the cockpit, her hand clasped in mine. I threw myself into the pilot's seat and started the startup sequence. "We need to get out of the atmosphere," I said. "The ship doesn't have any weapons, so we'll need to rely on speed." The freighter's engines hummed to life, and we shot out of the docking bay. The Market's defenses opened fire immediately, but I'd been expecting that. I threw the ship into evasive maneuvers, dodging and weaving through the chaos of the Market's orbital structure. "Hold on," I warned. "This is going to be rough." We burst out of the station's atmosphere and into open space. The stars stretched out before us, cold and beautiful and endless. "We made it," Elira breathed. "We actually made it." "Not yet," I said. "We need to get to a safe system, somewhere the warlord's forces can't reach us." I set a course for the nearest neutral system and engaged the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into streaks of light, and then we were gone. It was a small colony, barely more than a settlement on the edge of civilized space. The kind of place where people went to disappear, where the authorities didn't ask too many questions. I'd been there before, back in my mercenary days. I knew a few people who could help us. "Marcus, this ship can barely stay together," Crick said, his feathers slick with sweat from the effort of helping us fly it. "We need to land somewhere with a repair bay." "I know a place. We'll be safe there." The colony was as run down as I remembered. Tumble-down buildings, dusty streets, and the perpetual smell of engine exhaust and cooking grease. But it was quiet, and the people kept to themselves. We landed the freighter in a docking bay on the edge of town. The owner, a grizzled old Vark with a cybernetic eye and a missing arm, took one look at our battered ship and shook his head. "You're gonna need more than just a repair job," he said, his voice a low rumble. "She's practically scrap metal. We'll take whatever you can do, and I need a place to stay for a few nights." He looked at us, me, Elira, Crix, and the few other survivors we'd picked up along the way, and something in his expression shifted. "You're running from something," he said, "bad something. Not bad enough to scare you." "Nothing scares me, human." But he gave us the rooms anyway, and he started work on the ship the next morning. The days that followed were strange. Elira, who had spent her entire life in the center of an empire, had never been to a place like Sira. She walked through the dusty streets with wide eyes, taking in the chaos and grime of frontier life. "You don't have to stay," I told her one evening as we sat on the roof of the repair shop, watching the twin moons rise over the colony. "I can get you to a real system, somewhere with an embassy, somewhere they can help you." "Who would help me?" she asked quietly. "The empire is gone, my family is dead, I'm just a displaced princess with nothing to offer." "You have yourself, that's more than most people have." She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my chest ache. "Marcus," she said, "why did you come back for me?" I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Because I made a promise. I'm not your princess anymore. I'm not anyone's princess. You don't have to keep that promise." "I know I don't have to." I looked at her, and for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, I let myself see the exhaustion in her face, the sorrow in her eyes, the weight of everything she'd lost. "But I want to. I want to make sure you're safe. I want to make sure you're happy. I want to make sure you never have to go through anything like this again." She leaned into me, her head resting against my shoulder. "You're a good man, Marcus Webb." "I'm just a guard. You told me that yourself." "Guard, friend, whatever." She let out a soft laugh. "You're something more than you think you are." We sat there in silence for a long time, watching the moons rise over the colony. Chapter 4: The Plan. The news hit us 3 weeks later. Crix had been keeping tabs on the galaxy's happenings. The bird creature had a knack for information gathering that I was starting to appreciate. One morning, he came to me with a look of barely contained horror on his feathered face. "The warlord," he said. "Kalen, he's made a declaration." "What kind of declaration?" "He's announcing the sale of Princess Elira to the highest bidder." Crix's feathers ruffled with agitation. "There's going to be an auction, a public one, broadcasting across the entire galaxy. He wants to humiliate her, to show that the imperial bloodline is no more important than any commoners." I felt the rage building again, cold and sharp and terrible. "When?" I asked. "In 2 weeks, at the New Nebula Market." "New Nebula Market?" "The original one was destroyed. You did that. He's rebuilt it bigger and more secure than before." Crix shook his head. "Marcus, you can't go back there. It's suicide." "I'm not going back there. I'm going to do something better." I went to find Elira. She was in her room, reading from a datapad, and I saw her expression change when she saw the look on my face. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "Kalen's selling you," I said, my voice flat. "Public auction in 2 weeks." She paled. "He's using me as a spectacle. A way to prove that the Empire is truly dead." "Yes," I sat down across from her, "but I have a plan." "A plan? What kind of plan?" "I have contacts in the Resistance. Former soldiers, former guards, people who refuse to accept the warlord's rule. They've been looking for a chance to strike back. This is it." She looked at me with a mixture of fear and hope. "Marcus, that's insane. You can't take on the entire New Nebula Market with a handful of rebels." "No, but I can take on the warlord, and I can bring you home." "Home?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I don't have a home. The Empire is gone. My family is gone. There's nothing to go back to." "Then I'll build you a new one." I stood up, and she caught my hand before I could leave. "Marcus," she said, her voice very soft, "you don't have to do this. You've already done more than anyone could have expected." "Yes, I do, because I made a promise. I'm not your princess anymore." "You are, you always will be." I left her there, staring after me with tears in her eyes, and I went to find Crix. "Contact the Resistance," I told him. "Tell them I'm coming." 43 soldiers, a handful of ships, enough weapons to start a small skirmish, not a war. But the soldiers were fierce, and their cause was righteous, and when I told them my plan, they didn't laugh. "New Nebula Market is the most heavily fortified installation in the galaxy," said the Resistance leader, a grizzled female Zalosian named Saris. "You're asking us to storm it with 43 soldiers." "I'm not asking you to storm it. I'm asking you to cause chaos. Create a diversion. Give me enough time to get to the auction and extract the princess." "Extract her how?" "I'll figure that out when I get there." Saris looked at me for a long moment. "You're insane," she said finally, "but I like you. We're in." The 2 weeks that followed were the most intense of my life. We trained relentlessly, planning and preparing for the assault. We gathered intel on the New Nebula Market's defenses, studied its layout, found its weaknesses. And we waited. The night before the auction, Elira came to my room. "I want to come with you," she said. "Into the auction. I want to be there." "No. Marcus, I'm not a helpless princess. I can fight. I've been trained." "I know you can fight. That's not why I'm saying no." "Then why?" I looked at her and I let myself feel everything I'd been pushing away for weeks. The fear, the hope, the love that I'd been trying not to acknowledge. "Because I can't lose you," I said. "I've lost everything else. My home, my family, my purpose. But I can't lose you. You're the only thing that matters." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, close enough to touch, and she kissed me. It was soft and gentle and tasted like tears. "I'll be waiting for you," she said. "When you come back, I'll be waiting." "I'll come back, I promise." The next morning, we launched the assault. It was a massive, floating structure in the middle of a nebula, surrounded by defensive platforms and weapon batteries. The auction was being held in the center of it all, in a grand auditorium that could hold thousands. I approached in a stolen cargo hauler, its transponder broadcasting false codes. The defenses scanned me, found nothing suspicious, and let me through. Inside, the market was buzzing with activity. Dealers and buyers from across the galaxy had gathered for the auction, their ships packed into the docking bays. I moved through the crowds, invisible in my plain clothes. The resistance had done their job. As I made my way toward the auditorium, I heard the first explosions in the distance. The chaos was starting. I reached the auditorium and blended into the crowd. The auction was about to begin, and the energy in the room was electric. Nobles and merchants from 100 worlds had gathered to witness the fall of the imperial bloodline. And there on the stage was Aelira. She was chained to a pedestal, her copper skin pale, her eyes hollow. She was wearing a simple white dress that left her barefoot and vulnerable, and she was staring out at the crowd with the expression of someone who had given up. The auctioneer stepped forward, a greasy little creature with too many arms and a voice like grinding metal. "Welcome, honored guests. Welcome to the auction of a lifetime." He gestured to Aelira with a flourish. "Here we have the last surviving member of the imperial bloodline, a princess of Xylos Prime. And she can be yours." The crowd roared with laughter and applause. I forced myself to stay still, to wait for the right moment. The bidding began immediately, the numbers climbing rapidly. Aelira's price was astronomical, the highest I'd ever seen. "This is insane," someone whispered beside me. "Who would pay that much for a single princess?" The voice was familiar. I turned and my blood froze in my veins. It was Kaelin. He was standing right beside me, watching the auction with a smile that made my skin crawl. "These fools," he murmured, "they think they can buy an empire, but they're wrong." He glanced at me and his smile widened. "They're so wrong." I felt my hand move toward my weapon. Kaelin was right here, right in front of me. I could kill him. I could end this. But that would give the game away, and Aelira would still be trapped. I waited. The bidding continued and Kaelin's smile grew broader. "The winner is going to be very disappointed," he said. "They think they're getting a princess. What they're actually getting is a curse." A curse. The imperial bloodline carries a secret, a genetic lock. The princess can only be claimed by someone who shares her blood. Anyone else who tries will die in agony. He laughed. "It's the ultimate protection, and these fools have no idea." I felt a plan forming in my mind. The bidding reached its peak, and the auctioneer called for final offers. The room fell silent. "Going once, going twice. 5 million credits." The voice came from the back of the room, and everyone turned to look. I was the one who'd spoken. Kaelin's eyes went wide. He recognized me, and for a moment I saw something in his expression that I'd never seen before: fear. "Marcus Webb," he breathed, "you're supposed to be dead." "Sorry to disappoint." The auctioneer was flustered. "Sir, you can't just bid from the crowd. You need to be registered." "Take the bid or don't. I'm going to take the princess either way." The room exploded into chaos. Guards started moving toward me, but I was faster. I pulled out my weapon and fired a plasma bolt into the ceiling. "Everyone get down." The crowd scrambled, and I started fighting my way toward the stage. Aelira was watching me, her eyes wide with recognition and hope. "Marcus, I told you I'd come back." The fight was brutal. Kaelin's guards were everywhere, their weapons hot and blinding. I fought through them, taking wounds as I went. A plasma burn on my shoulder. a gash across my cheek, a broken rib that made every breath agony. But I kept moving, kept fighting. And then I reached the stage. Elira, I grabbed her, pulling her free of the chains. Come on. We ran together, through the chaos and fire, while the resistance covered our retreat. Cerys and her soldiers fought with a ferocity that made my heart swell. But Cailan was still out there, and he wasn't done. Marcus Webb, his voice boomed through the auditorium, amplified by the sound system. You can't escape. This station is rigged to blow. You're bluffing. Do you want to test that? I looked at Elira, and I saw the same fear in her eyes that was in my heart. Then we'll just have to be faster. We raced to the docking bay, the resistance close behind us. The explosions were starting now. The station's self-destruct system had been activated. Where's the ship? Elira shouted. There. I saw it, the freighter we'd arrived on, still waiting at the dock. I pushed Elira toward it, shouting for everyone to get on board. They're firing on the ship, Crick screeched. We're trapped. Get down. I grabbed Elira and pulled her to the ground, covering her with my body. The blast was deafening. The ship exploded, taking our only way out with it. We were trapped. They had us pinned, outnumbered 100 to 1. There was no way out. Marcus, Elira said, her voice quiet. What do we do? I looked at her and I saw the fear in her eyes. But I also saw something else, something that I'd never seen before. Trust. She trusted me. Even now, with death staring us in the face, she trusted me. Cerys, I said to the resistance leader, get your people to the emergency evacuation pods. Get them out of here. Marcus. That's an order, Cerys. She looked at me for a long moment, then she nodded. You're a good man, Marcus Webb, a very good man. Save the praise for later, now go. She led her people toward the pods, leaving me and Elira alone with the enemy. The guards closed in, and I raised my weapon. Marcus, what are you doing? Cailan's voice echoed through the docking bay. You can't win, you're outnumbered. Maybe, but I'm not outmatched. What are you talking about? I smiled, and I saw the confusion in his eyes. The Imperial bloodline, I said. It carries a genetic lock. Only someone who shares her blood can claim her, and I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I know a secret, Cailan, a secret that the Imperial family kept hidden for centuries. What secret? I looked at Elira, and I saw the understanding in her eyes. She knew what I was about to do. Marcus, she breathed, no, you can't. I can, I will. I turned back to Cailan. The Imperial bloodline is a lie. The princess is not the heir of Xylos Prime. She's just a woman. A woman who deserves to be free. Impossible, the bloodline markers were fabricated, a lie to maintain the illusion of purity. I smiled. The only thing that kept her safe was the world's belief that she was royalty. Cailan stared at me, his expression slowly shifting from confusion to fury. You're lying. Am I? I moved before he could react, grabbing Elira's hand and pulling her behind me. Then I raised my weapon and fired. I hit him clean in the chest. The shot was fatal, and in that moment, as Cailan crumpled to the ground, everything stopped. The guard stared at me, frozen in disbelief. But Elira, she smiled. You did it, she whispered. We're not done yet. I turned to the guards. Cailan is dead, the auction is over, you have no reason to fight. Stand down and you'll be spared. The guards hesitated, then one of them lowered his weapon. Then another. And another. Good, I said. Now get those evacuation pods ready, we're leaving. The explosion was beautiful in a terrible way, a burst of light and fire against the darkness of space. Elira was sitting beside me, her hand clasped in mine. You killed him, she said. You actually killed him. I promised you I'd bring you home. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Marcus Webb, guard, friend, protector. She squeezed my hand. And apparently my future. Your future. You freed me, not just from the auction, from everything. The empire, the bloodline, the lies. She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my heart race. I'm not a princess anymore. I'm just a woman, and I want to be with you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I kissed her. The empire never recovered. The chaos that followed Kaelin's defeat led to the dissolution of the imperial system altogether. New governments rose from the ashes, and the galaxy was remade. But the story of the human guard who started a war to save his princess, that story endured. They still tell it in taverns and spaceports. They still talk about Marcus Webb, the soldier who refused to give up, who fought through hell to bring his princess home. And somewhere, on a small colony at the edge of the galaxy, an old soldier sits on his porch and watches the twin moons rise. His princess sits beside him, her hand in his, her gray hair streaked with the same gold that once adorned her ceremonial robes. "Tell me again," she says. "Tell me about the day you found me." And he tells her, he always does. Because some stories deserve to be told forever.